That's because you're so good.
Yeah. Okie doke, guys.
All right.
So we have just finished watching Mr. Denton on Doomsday as part of the Holiness of the Twilight Zone. And today we'll be talking about the holiness of responsibility. So synopsis, Denton, a former gunslinger, now the town drunk. A young man challenges him to a gunfight. Denton knows he'll lose, will probably be killed, but a traveling salesman sells him a magic potion that will make him as fast as he used to be. Before the gunfight, he drinks the potion, then sees the other man do the same thing. They shoot each other at the same time, hitting each other in the hand. Neither will be able to shoot again. Denton tells the other man they've been blessed. They've been given a second chance to live a better life. The younger man in the episode went on to star in the TV series Mission Impossible.
I knew I'd
So usually when people watch, they go, "I know that person from somewhere," right? So that's the Easter egg fun of watching the Twilight Zone.
I kept thinking of that one movie, the Alfred Hitchcock movie.
So there's the Twilight Zone had many good
Great? Yeah.
stars and that sort of thing. So so let's start in terms of responsibility. There is a very powerful Jewish phrase, Jewish teaching from the Talmud, our 5th century text from Shavuot 39a, says, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh. All of Israel is responsible for each other, or all Israel are responsible for each other. It's an Aramaic phrase, and it can discuss what I've said as the domino effect of sin, but it also can expand to many other things, that all Israel are responsible for each other. So let's start with that powerful phrase. If we believe that, if we take that phrase from the Talmud and put it throughout history, what do you feel that can mean? All Israel are responsible for each other. Could be simple, so it could be complex, could be philosophical. What comes to mind when we read that?
If someone is hurting, we need to pay attention. We need to listen.
Okay, so we are responsible to those who are hurting in some way.
Right.
Okay, so sort of a care for one another. Good. Okay, wonderful. What else?
Keep everyone accountable.
Keep everyone accountable. Say more. What do you think?
If someone's doing something bad, remind them the domino effect, what their bad thing they're doing could cause other people to do.
So we are responsible for their actions as well. Good. Okay. Good.
How about all of Israel can be looked at as a body?
Okay.
And when one part of it ails, it's up to the whole body to repair or mend it, or
Beautiful.
Do what's necessary to make it healthy again.
Beautiful. I think all of that is encapsulated in this. I think that what does it mean for us to be responsible for one another? That can be responsible for people's their health, their making sure that they are taken care of. It also can mean that we are responsible for the actions of those that stray from what we feel is under Jewish ideals, morally or ethically correct. We are responsible for correcting that, responsible for taking that kind of responsibility. So I think that is a really great way to present that overarching theme, that responsibility is sort of both sides, right? It can be very good, like, don't worry, I'm responsible for you, or it can be a little bit harder, saying, I'm responsible for you, meaning something happens, we're responsible, right? So can we think of some examples of either side of that to put a little more context to it? We spoke in general, but what would be an example where we would say, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh. This is our responsibility.
can I use
Yep.
the episode?
Yeah, use the episode, please.
Sure.
Yes, yes.
Let's say everybody in the saloon was part of Israel. And the gentleman, the one with the potions, saw that the two were going to fight and one of them would be murdered or
Right.
killed. So he took steps to ensure that neither one got hurt badly,
Right.
and that nobody else in the proximity got incidentally hurt from their actions.
Very good. I think that's a great example that we see, and let's generalize for a minute. It's a great example using the Twilight Zone. We see something that's about to happen that will have a bad outcome. We can decide to have responsibility to intervene in a certain way. The peddler intervened, and thus may perhaps prevented death, prevented someone, the young man, to go on and live his life a certain way. Right? It was a double onus there. So there we see things occurring in our world. We see things that will not have a good outcome, and we intervene. Very nice. What else? What's another example that's something that could happen in the real world? Deb, what do you think?
Well, I think of the people who pick on other people.
Okay. Good.
And I was teased when I was in grade school.
Sure.
And I will
Okay.
never forget that.
Right.
I need to grow up. Yes, indeed, I do.
So what would it mean then if you see someone getting, bullied or whatever it is? We said, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'zeh. What's our role there?
Well, now we're all adults.
Yeah.
We can say, if this is happening to a child, we can say, hey, kids, let's step back for a minute. Let's wait a minute. This is not quite.
Okay. Make it a teaching moment.
Right.
Okay. Good. Okay.
I think you'd say that people, like we're all talking about them as like a collective whole inside the bar. The bystanders in the bar did not really live up to that because they were all just kind of like, take a shot.
Right.
This is exciting.
Yeah,
Right.
They were like bystanders, but they were just as guilty as anyone pulling a trigger for not intervening.
Right. And I think that's a good example of not observing this understanding, right? That, and I think, many wise people have said that if you remain neutral in those sort of situations, you inadvertently choose the side of the oppressor. So if you see that something is happening and you are simply a bystander, you are making a choice, right? You're not really neutral. You are making a choice. And so Judaism promotes the idea, instead of being a bystander, of being what we call an upstander, meaning that if you see something happening, locally or nationally or internationally, whatever it is, to do nothing is a choice. But if you understand Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'zeh, that you have a responsibility to that, whatever it might be. And there's certain things that we can and cannot do, but to do nothing is a choice as well.
It's funny you say that, because what's going on today, I kind of feel like I'm in that position. I feel like I want to do something to make a difference.
Right.
But there's this dichotomy going on that says, what can we do?
Right.
What can I do? And it just,
there's always right, correct. And I think that obviously, I think, we're speaking in, philosophical terms. When we put things to practicality, things get a little bit more complicated. And I think Rob, that's very good that we recognize that and say that sometimes we have that, the impulse, the impetus to do something, but it's a little more in the real world. It's fine for the rabbis to talk about it and saying you have to be responsible for each other. Things get a little more complicated, a little messier in the real world. And I think that is important to recognize in our discussion. So again, in theory, there's always a difference between taking things in theory and then when you attempt to, put them into the real world. But at the same time, we should not limit ourselves, right? There There are avenues to being responsible for one another that perhaps we haven't thought of. There are things that are small that might make a bigger difference than we think. There are ways that we can help without, physically intervening. There are things that are out there, and I think that part of our job and our struggle and our role as Jews is to find that way to do that. So let's go to the next section where it says, "Where are you?" The first word of Lamentations is this wonderful word, "echa," and it means how, right? And they named the book of Lamentations "echa" because it is all about the destruction of the temple. If you could imagine how big that was, right? The question is "echa," how could this have happened? How could this have possibly, you just say "echa," how? There are many things that occur in our world where we just react with that. How is this possible? How could that have happened? "Echa." And so it's a powerful Hebrew word and word of lamentation. So let's have, if one of you would like to read this first paragraph. It starts here on this page, and it goes to at the bottom where it says, "Who will inherit it?" Someone want to read?
Sure.
Okay, Rob, thank you.
Okay. With all the suffering in the world, it's easy to give up hope that things can be another way. Yet we don't abandon our ideas in the face of harsh realities. We are responsible for making a different choice. We are partners in the creation of a better world. Understanding and accepting this requires maturity, but unless we make this choice, we are as incomplete as Adam was in the Garden of Eden when God asked him, "Echa,
Where are you?"
Echa, where are you? God didn't ask for his sake, but for Adam's, because Adam didn't know where or who he was. We are the inheritors of the covenant between God and Israel, and every day we are challenged to accept the consequences of this inheritance. Every day we are supposed to ask ourselves, where are we? Where are we creating the world we want for ourselves, for others, and for those who will inherit it?
Thank you. The wonderful thing about Hebrew is it flows back and forth. In that particular case, "echa" meant where are you? But it can also mean how. So also that sort of dynamic of Hebrew. So and what this author David is speaking of is that moment when Adam and Eve have taken a bite of the forbidden fruit. They are aware of their nakedness, and they hide. And they hide from God. So God walks through the garden and asks, "Where are you?" Now, before we go into that, that's something I'd like you guys to think about, because we can do this two ways. One, we can think that the biblical God is not omniscient, meaning God doesn't actually know where they are. Or we can implant the more modern understanding of God, that God is all-knowing, and that God is actually asking, "Echa, where are you?" in a different way, right? So could it be the physical, and by the way, both are right? That the physical, where actually are you in the garden? I can't find you. Or what has happened to you, right? Where are you? Where's your presence right here? And so when we are discussing the responsibility of our actions and that sort of thing, we should ask ourselves, where are we? Physically and not physically, right? If God is all-knowing and God were to ask us, where are you? Right? God's not asking, where are you located? God's asking, where are you in life? Where are you? So that's really where this comes from. Second paragraph.
Okay, I can finish.
Oh, sure, Rob. Thank you.
Our sages taught that we are responsible for others. To prove this, they commented on the phrase in Leviticus, "And they shall fall one upon the another." They shall fall upon, and they shall fall one upon another. The rabbi said that people fall because of our brothers fall, because our brothers fall, to teach us that we are all responsible for one another. The French Jewish philosopher Emmanuel Levinas developed this thought and warned against the temptation to care only for ourselves. He said, a person who is fully human, a person who is a fully human soul, does not retreat into himself. Our humanity depends on being responsible for and reaching out to others.
So this is a colleague of mine, David Spinrad, and I loved what he said here.
My glass.
Oh, sure, yeah. We talked about the domino effect of sin, right? There's in the Talmud it says mitzvah goreret mitzvah, avera goreret avera. One mitzvah, one good deed or blessing or commandment leads to another. One sin leads to another. This is sort of a play on that, in that Leviticus says, and they shall fall one upon the other, meaning that we fall or we fail or we go down the wrong paths because others fall and others fail or others are not there to help, right? And so we warn ourselves against not, we're saying, retreating into ourselves, caring only about what we do. Because what the philosopher is saying is what we do has actions, has outcomes rather, that we might not be aware of, right? Things that we do affect other people and might cause other people to do things. So let's hear some on that, and shall fall one upon another, and how that means in terms of being responsible and reaching out to others. What do you think, guys?
I think that could be a reason why a lot of the world is in the condition that it is because that is not one, so to speak, brother does not teach the
Right.
other that we're all responsible for the well-being of everybody. Because nobody seems to care, it seems
Right.
like.
Everybody's out for their own good.
Right.
It really
Yeah.
upholds the value of, if I do a good deed. I had a teacher in school that always said, pay it forward.
Right.
There's some quote, it was like, spread acts of kindness like confetti.
Mm.
So, we live in a world where if you find $1 on the ground, you're not going to ask whose dollar it is. You're going to pick it up and stuff in your pocket.
Right.
Now, mind you, you have 20 other dollars in your pocket, but that might have been the last dollar in someone else's pocket.
Right. Right.
Do you think maybe some people are innately gifted, if you can use that word, with the ability to sense that or feel that towards others?
I would say that each one of us has the possibility for empathy. I think that besides those who have mental conditions which deny empathy, sociopathic, narcissistic personality disorders, things like that, but in general, each one of us has the capability to feel empathy and responsibility for our actions, meaning that we note that the things that we do affect others, and that matters to us. People who are sociopathic or narcissistic personality, they do things and they don't see the reaction. They don't register the reaction on other people's faces or their words, meaning they will do something and it won't matter what the other person views by that. We who do not suffer from those disorders, or at least it should, have the capacity that when we make a choice, we see how it affects people. And that effect on people guides us to make the decision again or make a different decision.
Right.
If that makes sense, right?
Yes, it does.
Right. So when you are a kid and you are mean to someone and you see that person cry, that affects you. And okay, that had a negative impact, so I'm not going to do that again, right? That sort of thing. Okay. What we should remember by this is that there are those who don't realize that the things that they do affect other people. They may say it doesn't matter if I do this, no one's going to know, no one's going to tell. No, it doesn't have any effect, right? Who cares if I steal this? Who cares if I act this way? Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter, but we don't know the extent of our actions to other people, how we speak to people, the actions that we make, the choices that we make, because we have forgotten that we are responsible for one another. There may be things that we don't see, right? It was a great example, right? You pick up $1. Someone could have been waiting for that $1. It could have been somebody who was lost, right? Their last $1. We don't know. We think of it as simply as $1, not the possibility, right? Or even the question of when we see someone who is on the street and is panhandling or begging, right?
I see it every day.
Right. We do. We see it every day. And so we don't know if that $1 that we gave them is going to be the one that can get them what they need, right? We don't know, their story, those sort of things. It is up to us to feel that responsibility for one another. Now that goes right into our next aspect of being responsible for one another. Someone else want to read? Tikkun Olam. Thank you.
In reference to individual acts of repair, the phrase Tikkun Olam figures prominently in the Lurianic account of creation and its implications. God contracted the divine self to make room for creation. Divine light became contained in special vessels, or kelim, some of which shattered and scattered. While most of the light returned to its divine source, some light attached itself to the broken shards. These shards constitute evil and are the basis for the material world. Their trapped sparks of light give them power. According to the Lurianic account, the first man, Adam, was intended to restore the divine sparks through mystical exercises, but his sin interfered. As a result, good and evil remained thoroughly mixed in the created world, and human souls previously contained within atoms also became imprisoned within the shards. The repair that is needed, therefore, is twofold: the gathering of light and of souls to be achieved by human beings through the contemplative performance of religious acts. The goal of such repair, which can only be effected by humans, is to separate what is holy from the created world, thus depriving the physical world of its very existence, and causing all things to return to a world before disaster, within the Godhead, and before human sin, thus ending history.
So this is a mystic view of Tikkun Olam, right? This pulls away the reality of it and says behind the curtain, this is what's happening, right? The sparks and the light and God contracting God's self and the reality and physical, whatever. That's what Lurianic mysticism was all about. The Kabbalistic northern Israel in Svat, in the 15th century.
Was
This was sort of
Lurianic like a
Isaac Luria was the founder.
Mm-hmm.
So Lurianic is that.
Dan Porak gave me a book on Kabbalah where it
There you
talks
go.
about God's light and all of the divine light,
Right.
more or less being covered by a curtain.
Right.
And through good acts, humanity is trying to slowly find that curtain to be able to lift it and maybe achieve a little bit closer to God through the good acts that we do.
Right. And so that's another sort of, all these are through whether you whichever way you believe in it, can either be metaphorical understandings, or you can, if you're a true mystic, believe that this is actually what is happening behind the curtain. But I wanted to add that to this discussion, this idea of divine light and special vessels and power and all that sort of stuff. What does this do for you guys for the discussion of being responsible for each other and Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world, the putting back together of the world? Does it do anything? Does it help? Is it interesting? Is it like, okay? What do you think? Hope. Tell me more. What do you think?
Like you mentioned it during service, Tikkun Olam sounds nice. Like,
Yeah.
can you imagine? It's like when your preschool teacher says, "Just get along."
Right.
It's like, it sounds really nice.
Right.
If we talk about, if we could just repair the world, we could stop every bad thing going on right now. It's, I don't want to say impossible because it sounds negative, but very difficult. It would take a lot of effort by a lot of individuals. But the fact that we still think it might be a tangible thing in the future kind of gives you hope. Gives something as bleak as the earth might seem, not even necessarily the earth, the political situations in certain countries. If you're looking at labor rights, if you're looking at politics, treatment of different minorities, it's like, it just seems awful. And then you see, we're making progress.
Right.
Baby steps, but the world's getting a little bit better for certain things.
Right. Good. Okay. Good. I liked it. That could provide a little bit of hope that there is It's not hopeless. It's not, our work is not in vain. Okay. Deb, Rob, any other thoughts that this comes?
I keep reading over and over, and it's very, very philosophical. I'm
It
not
is.
exactly sure. There's so many things you can do. So how does this whole, how does the Yetzer Hatav and the Yetzer,
Yetzer Hatov, Yetzer Harav. Yeah.
how does
Yetzer
that
Hara,
all
yeah.
fit into this view of Tikkun Olam?
Right. So Yetzer Hatov and Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara are also mystic ideas. They are Yetzer Tov, which is good intentions, good inclinations, and Yetzer Hara is evil intentions, evil inclinations. They are sort of like the angel and devil on your shoulder you've seen in the cartoons. Okay, so we each are imbued with both, and so we must learn to follow one rather than the other, but know that both are natural parts of our soul. So working to diminish the Yetzer Hara, and to do more through the Yetzer Tov, the good inclinations and good intentions, is part of our own aspects of Tikkun Olam, of repairing the world, by repairing ourselves and making ourselves
So could that be
better.
like those glass shards?
Yeah, it could be.
Okay.
Could be, right? I think all of it is discussion and philosophical. So I think all of it is possible. There are also the idea to just say these are different philosophies and different stories to get us thinking about, being responsible for one another, being responsible for the world, and whichever one works for you, great. If the broken charge and the divine light is a good motivator for you, great. If the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara is another one, great. But there are thousands of stories in Judaism, right? So we pick the ones that inspire us and think, this is what I think helps me get going. So, and they don't always connect so well, right?
Yeah.
I think there's always some, multiple philosophical views and multiple
So
theological
that's what
views.
I liked about the way this was worded. Because
Sure.
I kind of like the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Hatav
Yeah.
philosophy of good and evil, and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
good intentions and bad intentions.
Good.
I
Good.
like the way you kind of make it fit into this overall.
Good. Well, I'm glad.
philosophy.
I'm glad.
So when
Okay.
it says Adam was intended to restore the divine sparks through mystical exercises, but his sin interfered.
Yeah.
What caused the initial shattering and scattering of the vessel? Is there any description on that? Like, what
Yeah,
was
there
it?
is. Yeah, if you read more about the Lurianic story, this is sort of
Was it the original sin that caused it to shatter and scatter, or what was? And also, does it go into any more about the special vessels? Like,
It does. It goes into those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It does. Yeah, it
describes
does.
I didn't know if that word translated to mean something
Yeah.
huge.
So there's more that you can read. Actually, you can Google Lurianic and the vessels and all that sort of
Okay.
stuff, and it can give you a little more info about it, right? I forget exactly what was, if it was the Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit that caused it, or if it was Cain killing Abel, or something occurred within the Genesis stories when the plan sort of fell apart. I'd have to look back on that, but to be truly forthcoming, I don't remember exactly. But
Okay.
but it is possible that from what we're reading, that the sin that they refer to here is the eating of the forbidden fruit and the expulsion from Eden. It gets a little more complicated with that, but because that took us out of that mystical realm of Garden of Eden, and we had to be on our own, and we were tilling for the soil, so things were a little bit different. But I'd have to read up more on Lurianic theory. But Kabbalah is not my specialty. So let's read this next part here: collective versus individual responsibility. Volunteer. Yeah, thank you.
According to the older thinking in the Bible. The punishment for an unlawful act is exacted from the culprit as well as his or her descendants. Thus, we read in the Decalogue, God visits the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generations of those who reject me. That's from Exodus and Numbers. We have confirmation of this position in the case of King
Hezekiah.
of Judah in the 727 to 698 before the Common Era, who was told by the prophet Isaiah that his support of the Babylonian king will cause problems not only for him, but for his sons as well.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. We do read in Exodus and in Numbers and others that there is the descendants keep the guilt, right? And in some ways, right, the third and the fourth generations pay for our mistakes and sins, right? Now, God is speaking, and the Torah is speaking about sort of a big one of the rejection of God and all of sort of an idolatry and those sort of things. But I think that there is some pieces that we can take in the modern era about, again, what we were talking about, the actions that we take having an effect upon others. So we can think either literally of our descendants or whatever, or we can think a little bit more up in the air metaphorically as to what does that mean? What could we take it to mean in the broadest sense that the guilt of the parents is upon the children? If we're not thinking literally our children will pay for our sins, which is fine if you want to think that, but and in some ways I think that is true, depending on how we raise them and that sort of things. But right. But if we think about it in a more broad sort of way,
to discourage you from doing anything bad.
Okay.
It's like public hangings.
Okay.
A lot lower crime rate. People see something and they're like, wow, that's bad.
In theory, right?
Yeah, people are a lot less likely to do something bad if they think, well, my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren have shame brought upon them.
So it could be a deterrent, sort of.
Yeah.
Okay. Could be a deterrent. Okay. Good. What else?
If the parents or whomever is a bad person,
Right.
a criminal, they may teach their criminal ways
Right.
to their children,
Right.
and tell them that this is how you really make money, or this is how
Right.
you get what is deserving of you.
Right.
Since nobody's going to care about you, you have to do what is best for you and to do it your way to get what you want.
So evil begets evil, right?
Yes,
And then there's
yes.
the cycle of violence, right? If
Yes.
it is likely that if you are abused, you will abuse. We can also think of, from what you were saying, we can also think of things as racism and anti-Semitism and homophobia, right? We teach them to our children, and our children grow up knowing these values, and then, so there is the guilt that comes with it in that way. What else? Deb, what do you think?
Still processing.
Okay, no problem. No pressure.
That seems like the last one.
No pressure. Yeah, these are good things to process, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to read that second paragraph?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometime during the seventh century, before the Common Era, a new approach seems to have developed regarding the question of responsibility. Deuteronomy 24:16 states, "Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. One shall be put to death only for one's own crime." This same idea is propounded by the prophet Jeremiah, who believed that in the future they shall no longer say parents have eaten sour grapes and children's teeth are blunted, but everyone shall die for his own sins. Whoever eats sour grapes, his teeth shall be blunted. That's from Jeremiah and Ezekiel. This is a clear statement affirming the principle of individual responsibility.
So in other words, we see, as much as we would like to see that the Torah is one sort of flowing document, the writers of Exodus and Numbers had a different view of responsibility than the Deuteronomic school. The Deuteronomic school of the 7th century BCE seemed to indicate that parents are not responsible for the crimes of their children, nor children responsible for the crimes of their parents, which goes in direct conflict with what we just read, that if you have guilt or sins of the parent, the third and fourth generation, it will go to the children, third and fourth generation. So what we have then here becomes a conversation in the Torah. Is it collective responsibility, meaning that the deterrent, the things we spoke about, that the things that we do affect the next generations? Or is it the more Deuteronomic idea that whatever your parent does doesn't necessarily affect you? You have your own choices of how to do that, and you do not have to pay for the sins of your parents.
I think it's clearly the former.
You think the former?
Yes.
Okay.
And a perfect example of that is the current immigration issues that we have. There's a lot of people out there that believe because a child's parent came here illegally that the whole family should be.
Right. There's the weight of the parents' sin.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is so wrong.
Right.
Just because they may have come here illegally,
Right.
the children they're no way responsible for what their parents might have done before they were even born or knowledgeable of it. And I just don't like.
That's a great view of that, Rob. I think you're right. I think that policies in place seem to indicate that the children suffer because of the choices of the parents.
And that's just completely wrong.
Again, this is a good example of taking something in theory that we see in the Torah and placing it in the practicality of the world, right? Someone can say, well, the guilt of the parents is upon the children. It says so in the Torah. And then you have a situation where you have children who are now locked up in cages because their parents made a choice.
Yeah.
And so are they responsible? And how many, another example that I'll give you is a different one in terms of there was a story on NPR on This American Life about a family who saved a Jewish family from the Holocaust in the former Soviet Union. And so, in other words, this person hid, these people during the Holocaust, and that person eventually was able to go to America and have kids and that sort of thing. Well, at a certain point, that person who did the hiding reached out and to the other people and for help. They had some landlord issues or whatever it is, and the granddaughter, went to check it out and that sort of thing. And the question was, like, how responsible am I? Like, how far down does the gratefulness of you saving my grandfather's life? I want to help you, but there's certain things I can do or can't do, right? It was an interesting question of like, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for you, but I can't lift mountains to help your problem. Like that is sort of the practicality problems of things that seem very good in theory, that like you would forever owe, your existence to this person, right? But you also can't deal with lawyers and cost and,
Did you ever see
right.
that video on YouTube? It was made in Israel. It was something similar to that, where a gentleman saved Jews during the Holocaust. And the state of Israel was recognizing him for his actions. This was back in the 80s, but it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's in an auditorium, a big auditorium. And they they pointed him out, asked him to stand up, him and his wife, and they gave the story about what he had done. And then they said, is there anybody here who had been affected by his actions, maybe related to somebody he had saved? Well, then a person stands up, and then another, and another, and another. And at the end of it, everybody there was standing up that had been, born or related to somebody he had saved during the Holocaust. It was really touching.
Right.
It was amazing.
So that is, that there is an effect that we have, a large effect that we have, that we can possibly have, right? It's why the Talmud says, to save a life is to save an entire world. Because
Yeah.
if you save a life, that means that person will have children, and eventually we go back to the idea that the entire world was created through Adam and Eve, one family, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. Good. Okay. Any other thoughts on Exodus, Numbers, Jeremiah,
What's your
Ezekiel?
view on all of that? Or is it a little above?
Well, I think that I do want to always give things the historical distance they deserve and the authorships they deserve. I would rather. Well, I think it's a little bit of both, because I think that we are responsible, and there is responsibility. As a father, I certainly understand the effect that I can have on my children, and that the way that I raise my children has an effect on the world in the future, because that person or those little people will grow up and be adults and make big decisions, and that will be guided by me. So I think that exists. I also think that that we do have an individualistic sense of responsibility, meaning that if someone in our family is proven to commit a crime or whatever it is, the whole family is not responsible for those actions, right? Everyone makes individual choices. Certainly, you could possibly trace it back, and I think it's important from a psychological point of view to say, well, how did that person grow up, and were they, But at the same time, they still made the choice, and we do have to do that.
Necessarily, then it may not be so crazy when you hear certain people talking about the nation as a whole, not the individuals
Right.
within the nation, but our nation as a whole,
Right.
having some responsibility then in relationship to slavery.
Sure.
Okay.
I think that that's fair, because we are now the not everyone, right? But there are grandchildren and great grandchildren of slave owners. There are grandchildren and great grandchildren of slaves themselves. And so the builders of America, I think there can be some sort of responsibility, a collective responsibility.
This is already affecting me.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Right. I think we have to think with practical things like that, which I love to throw into the mix, because we shouldn't just deal in theory and philosophy. I think at a certain point we have to decide what we collectively wish to represent. What America wishes to represent. What are the choices that make it so that if we are one collective nation, what the next generation in America sees that we do, right? What are the laws that we pass, the things that we do, because that then translates into how the next generation of Americans will rise up. So I think that in a very real way, we do have that larger responsibility. Okay, so let's read the final responsibility and accountability in our days. Rob, would you like to read?
Sure.
Thank you.
Now that I got my glasses on.
All right.
In modern times, our legal system takes for granted that the only person who commits an unlawful act should be punished. And that's the way it ought to be. It is the fairest system that we know of. However, the social consequences of this thinking are not thereby eliminated. For usually it is not the guilty alone who suffer a penalty. Entire families are emotionally and economically affected by the deeds of those who are guilty. Furthermore, we all recognize that children often suffer because of what their parents have done.
Good. So more of what we've just sort of covered.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Okay, go ahead, Rob.
In our time, what challenges our sense of fairness is not that the culprit should be convicted when he or she is caught. We expect that. The problem for us is how to deal effectively with those who try and often succeed to avoid their personal responsibility. In the last few decades, it has become clear that in our legal system, accountability is becoming a cheap commodity. If you know how to circumvent the law, or to get the help of a professional who can do that for you, you can easily get away with murder. Today, you can get caught speeding while driving under the influence, or blurt out a racial slur, or even insult someone's ethnicity or sexual orientation, And later, you can considerably limit your accountability by going into therapy or rehab. How true is that?
Yeah.
In and of themselves, therapy and rehab are positive measures. However, just as we emphasize that individuals are responsible for their own deeds, fairness requires that we also pursue those who refuse to take responsibility for their illegal acts.
So this is Rifat Sorrentino. Sorrentino, he's a very well-known rabbi and colleague. What he is touching on here is, again, facing the practicality of what does it mean to be held accountable and to hold responsibility for our deeds, right? There are endless loopholes and endless PR things and things that we can do to sort of circumvent or lessen the impact or whatever it is to say we're doing this or we're doing this. Does that mean that we are taking accountability? Does that mean we are taking responsibility? Or does it not? I see a what do you think?
Yeah, it seems like every single time someone does something crummy and it comes out on the news, they're like, sorry, I have a mental disease.
Right.
Which completely illegitimizes those who actually have a mental disease.
Right.
When someone of power just says, oh, I'm going to claim this card and I'm going to go to rehab, or I'm going to say, hey, that's my bad. I was drunk whenever I committed this crime. Therefore, my consent was just as blurred.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're still just as guilty. Any intoxicant or instantly proclaimed mental illness there.
We see this a lot now. There's, thanks to the technology of phones and phone cameras, we see a lot more instances on social media of people being openly racist or openly, or whatever it is. They're caught because of the beauty of technology. People figure out who they are, who they work for. They contact their jobs, whatever. Sometimes they're fired, sometimes they're not, but sometimes they go on the news and sometimes they go on talk shows or whatever it is, and they say, oh, this isn't me. I was just angry that day or whatever, but is that taking responsibility? Is that being accountable? Or is that,
Let's talk law enforcement.
Okay. Or law enforcement.
Yeah,
okay.
The same technology is available, but how can, and I'll use the instance of the Indiana State Police.
Yeah.
The guy down there on 231 across from Montgomery High School there shoots and kills a guy who's working on his car.
Right.
When the investigation is said and done, the cop doesn't have a body cam and the car doesn't have a dash cam. And my thought is, wait a minute. Yeah. Since when do officers not have body cams anymore because of the former issues? And what's more, the dash cams on the cop cars.
Right.
Every cop car has. How can the state police say that their car didn't have a dash cam?
Right. And I think you're right. I think that there are measures that we can put in place like dash cams and body cams to try and hold accountable for those who would not be held accountable.
Those empowered also have the ability to manipulate and or lose certain evidence.
It is. It is disturbing. It is disturbing. But that's what Rifat is sort of talking about here is, we would expect that someone who is tried and convicted, that's the natural thing. You get caught for a crime, you're tried, you're convicted. We understand that that's the process that works. However, when things don't go that way, right? When a police officer lies and says, this is what happened, then we look at the body cam and the body cam shows something totally different. Well, what happens there in terms of accountability and responsibility, right? Right.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Something I've noticed is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's like Warner Brothers or Disney, but at the beginning of some cartoons now, it'll say, this cartoon was made in a different time where different things were acceptable. Although it does not reflect the views of this company now, we will not edit this just to keep it accurate to that time. Yeah. I think that's kind of important. Because there's people who come out with their tweets and they'll say, hey, listen, what I'm saying now in this current light, yes, it was an awful thing to say, but in 2004, we were a little more lenient. We could have gotten away with this in 2004, but now being sensitive, not sensitive, being aware of how our actions affect people, being like, we can't say that in 2019. Well, you shouldn't have said it in 2004 either.
Right.
You just got away with it.
Right.
Neil Brennan has a stand-up where he says that. He's like, there's probably some caveman doing something really obscene and asks the caveman, like, is this okay if I do this around you? And she's like, yeah, it is now, but in like a couple thousand years, it might not be.
Right.
And Neil Brennan's like, and then that was 2 weeks ago when Louis C.K. got in trouble.
Right, exactly. So I think you're right. I think that, there was, I think it was Clint Eastwood who said, in my day, we didn't call this racist. Well, it was racist.
Yeah.
Just because we didn't call it racist doesn't mean it wasn't, right?
Well, we were in school.
Right.
And I think you could probably have instances of this. I remember being in school doing not a play, but, choir, and you're singing for your parents, during and we're singing Jimmy Crack Corn.
Right.
I mean, how racist is that?
Right, exactly.
But,
And so as morality and ethics evolve in our society, right, we learn we learn about different, again, I'm not sure if sensitivities is the word, but, we learn as to why something is considered inappropriate or whatever it is. And I, with my 4.5-year-old son, we watch old cartoons, Looney Tunes cartoons, and they have those things. And, and we look back at the 1940s and 1950s and we go, holy moly, that is completely inappropriate for lots of reasons. And so we'll fast forward through a bunch of stuff because as an adult, I find it fascinating to see from a civilization and an evolution point of view. But for my son, who's 4.5, he doesn't go into that thinking. And so we fast right forward through the amount of cartoons that were made in the 1940s.
No wonder why boomers are so warped.
Really.
Right.
I was raised on those cartoons.
Right.
It cracks me up when I think back to the Bugs Bunny episodes along with Yosemite Sam and their fight back and forth across the Mason-Dixie line.
Yeah.
And Yosemite Sam has the stars and bars on everything, and Bugs Bunny turns himself into a slave, and he gives him a whip, saying, "Don't beat me, NASA! Don't beat me, NASA!"
Right, exactly. I mean, I'm just so surprised that some of the cartoons that I've watched that are about Nazism and their Hitler's in there and all this sort. I'm like, who's watching this? So, but that is something that we have to realize that that appropriateness and morality and ethics evolve, right? And that. And when someone says, in my day, well, that's nice. It wasn't right then either. We now have the ability a little bit more stronger to say, we can't do that right now, right? Just like anything else, right?
What cartoon artist in the 40s was like, what 4-year-olds are going to love? Comrade Bugs Bunny.
Right, exactly.
Cigar smoking, large fur hat wearing Bugs Bunny.
Right.
A lot of, the stuff that, it's
Even
fascinating.
in the 70s, you don't have to go very far back. In the 70s, this was a huge comedy when I was a teenager. Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
You couldn't make Blazing Saddles today.
That's right. Mel Brooks even said that. You couldn't make it today. Yeah.
The guy at the very beginning where he's like, the guy, Mel Brooks played the drunk in Cell 4 that grew on little. That's the whole same thing. You talk about the best gun and then a shot a 15-year-old and crawled inside a bottle.
Right. And we may, during this series, encounter some things in the Twilight Zone that are like, wow, that was a little iffy, but I think that Rod Serling was very progressive of his day. So I think for most part, we won't see that, but you never know.
And if he does, it's probably to make
to make a point.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have. Any last questions or comments on Mr. Denton on Doomsday or the Holiness and
Responsibility? It's nice to have a bunch of people here, but you know what? It's just as nice to have a small group too.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I'm glad that all of us are here to speak about it. So hopefully all of this sort of made your view of responsibility a little more complex, a little more confusing.
Absolutely.
Yep. Good. That's usually my job. So good. So we will see you guys after the holidays for our next one. Okay. Thank you so much.
Or tonight, right?
Or tonight. We'll see you tonight for Hanukkah. Yeah. And ending. All right.